over 500 people here so far. And this is a conversation I've been really looking forward to having. If you don't know me, I'm Stephen Beschloss with America America. I'm here with Ezra Levin, who's co-executive director and co-founder of Indivisible, and it's a group that's committed to building an inclusive democracy and pushing back against Trump's agenda. That's been true not just now, but for a number of
Yes.
years. And specifically, Indivisible as a lead coordinator for Saturday's No Kings protest around the country, which surely is aptly timed, which we want to talk about,
Indeed.
both specifically that and then also sort of more broadly about mass protest and the
Yeah.
importance of it in this moment. I'm particularly interested in sort of in light of Trump's sort of ridiculous and dangerous federalizing of the National Guard and calling up the Marines in Los Angeles. I mean, how much did you expect this moment to be as fraught as it is?
So we started planning No King's Day when there were rumors circulating, not confirmed yet, but rumors circulating that Trump was planning to do something that he wanted to do for quite some time, which is waste tens of millions of taxpayer dollars on a big fascistic military parade for
Yeah,
himself on his birthday. So his 79th birthday is June 14th. It happens to be Flag Day. It happens to be the 250th anniversary of the forming of the Continental Army that
yeah,
was formed to push back against a king, a mad king, no less. And we were worried that this was a prime example of not what a typical American president or even a right-wing conservative president would do, but it looks something like would come out of North Korea, something that would come out of a authoritarian dictatorship. It is
okay, yeah,
a narrative play to make dear leader look all powerful and to cow everyone else, to convince institutions, leaders, and the American public that this guy's in charge and he's got all the power and you should just lay down and allow him to do what he wants. And narrative matters, stories matter. That kind of imagery matters.
right,
The worst thing that's going to happen to American democracy is for a lot of people to quietly and privately disagree with what's going on. To
yeah,
believe that this guy is indeed in charge, because if you believe that, and if you are not willing to vocalize publicly your opposition, he is in charge. They are in charge. The democracy is lost. So when we heard he was planning to run tanks through the streets of DC, we said, okay, what we don't want is some big conflagration in
yeah,
DC. We do not want some kind of counter protest of the military in DC. We don't want him to claim that peaceful protesters are attacking the military. Instead of that, he can have down DC for the day. He can have his pathetic little parade. Fine. We're going to organize literally everywhere else. That was the plan as of about a month or so ago when we announced this. And when we announced it, when you say you're going to throw a party, Stephen, you don't know who's going to come. And
yeah.
maybe people aren't going to come. And at the time we announced it, we had, a handful of partners, good partners like American Federations of Teachers and 5051 and others. But we had maybe 100 events. Right now, there are 1,800 events, and and this is all over the country. Blue states, red states, purple states, rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas. It's actually all over the world. We're in Europe, we're in South America, we're all over.
Crazy.
But this was already picking up speed before he orchestrated the chaos that he orchestrated in LA. And I do believe that this is part of the plan. He is escalating tensions. He is trying to create chaos so that he can claim, I am the one who can fix it. I must send in the
Yeah,
military. I must send in the Marines. This is not some brilliant new idea that he's created. This is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. This
yeah,
is how it operates. So did I know he was going to try to initiate chaos in Los Angeles when we announced this a month ago? No. Nobody knew that, but we could see the writing on the wall that
yeah,
he was trying to build himself up. And what do people who are trying to concentrate power in their own hands and divide the public do? Well, they try to sow dissent. They try to divide and conquer. They try to create chaos so that they can come in and claim that they're fixing it while also creating more chaos. So I'm not surprised. I'm alarmed, but I'm not surprised. And I'm very happy that on Saturday we have a container for peaceful, boisterous, empowering protest all across the country.
Right, right. 1,800 events. That's a lot. That already sounds like more than the no hands off protest in April.
That's
Uh,
right.
do you have any sense of scale in terms of people? I mean, it's always hard to estimate these things. What's your sense of it?
It's always hard to estimate these things, but I can estimate it's going to be bigger. So
Yeah,
hands off, I was very impressed by. That was 1,300 events all across the world. Not a single incident of violence reported. They were playful. They were empowering. People brought their dogs and their kids, and they showed up in huge force. 100,000 in D.C., 250,000 in Chicago, more in New York City, but also 1,300. So we were
yeah,
17 in Montana. We had 14 in Alaska. We had one on every island in the islands of Hawaii. So we were everywhere then too. But that was 1,300. Conservative estimates had us at about 3.5 million people
yeah,
showing up. We are now 1,800 events, and we're continuing to register new events every hour. It's growing every single hour. New people are registering events, and we will until tomorrow night. I would expect to see significantly more people. So this will be the largest protest in modern American history and
yeah,
certainly recent history. And it's being led not by me, not by the organizations who are co-sponsoring. That's part of it, but it's really being led by normal, everyday
mm,
people on the ground who are seeing what's happening in this country, who are seeing what he's doing in LA and elsewhere and saying, wait a minute, we don't do kings in America. And I need to show that I'm part of the pro-democracy movement. And I can show up in my hometown. I can host an event in my hometown. I don't need to travel hours to get there. I can be part of this just by standing up and being part of the group of Americans who's fighting back against this.
yeah. So let's sort of linger on this issue about numbers. I'm sure you've seen the Harvard researcher, political scientist Erica Chenoweth,
Yep,
who's done
yep.
a lot of research in terms of political change around the world. She's looked at political movements in a number of countries. For those who don't know, specifically suggesting that 3.5% is a of a country's population is a figure that represents the kind of concentration of energy and focus that, with clearly defined goals, can uh, articulate sort of what redress is needed and to be able to really drive change. So, in the American context, 3.5% is 12 million people.
Right.
Don't want to put a lot of pressure on you, but do you think we're going to look at those kind of numbers this week and as on Saturday? And do you think this is part of the movement toward not just the sort of very occasional events, but a more sustained effort?
Let me say a couple of things. Yes, we are building. We are building and we are getting bigger. We've gone from November, December, January. The conventional wisdom was opposition was dead, resistance wasn't coming back, and Donald Trump was all powerful, to the February recess events at congressional town halls where people are saying, oh my gosh, people are protesting Elon Musk. Where are all these people coming from? To the April 5th protests, which sent shockwaves through the political system to have that many people come out. I expect us to build further and get new populations, new constituencies out on No King's Day. But I want to be clear. So I love Erica Chenoweth's research. I find it quite informative and it guides some of our own thinking.
Mhm.
It's not some magical number. You
Right.
hit 12 million and boom, democracy won. Everybody go home. That's not how it works. You need sustained pressure
Yeah.
because the folks in power, they can withstand one event. No individual advocacy campaign, no individual march is suddenly going to push the fascists out. They are dug in right now. And the 3.5% figure is about 3.5% of sustained pressure over time when you're mobilizing a relatively small but persistent segment of society that
Yeah.
refuses to accept authoritarian rule. What we have seen over the course of the last 6 months is we've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger as his actions have become more egregious and more in the public eye, and as more and more people have said, what is going on? I've got to do something. And they show up. So is No King's Day going to save our democracy on its own? I can guarantee you it will not. What is an incredibly successful No King's Day will be an unusual number of people in an unusual number of places, many of whom have never participated in any protest before in their life, coming out and not just marching for the day, but connecting with their community wherever they are and asking themselves, great, we are all aligned here. that we've got to push back, where do we have leverage? What do we do next? What do we need to train on in order to upskill ourselves so we can effectively push back beyond June 14th?
Right.
I
So,
think we can accomplish that,
yeah,
but I don't want to set the goal of June 14th, we're done.
yeah.
That's not going to happen. June 14th is an inflection point. It's not
It's
an
a,
end point.
I mean, we can do this each time. It's a starting point for the next phase of
Mm.
this. Look,
Yep.
it's, one of the things that struck me about the hands-off protests, and, there was a concentration of a lot of, remarkably motivated people who outraged and worried and fearful and hopeful and, all the things that you want on a wide range of issues, representing this flood of hostile action since
Yep.
January 20th, and the fact that it captured that whole, if you will, diversity of outrage was important, and as an inclusive kind of event. But it also strikes me that the challenge going forward is to start to, in some sense, hone in a bit more. I think one of the reasons that the Musk Tesla protests have been successful is that they've been as focused as they had toward Musk and Tesla. So I'm wondering whether you sort of look at the next phase being in some ways, not just about hands off, not just about like, no, of course we don't want a mad king in charge of our country, but maybe it's about, I don't know. Maybe it's about uh, American citizens that are now being kidnapped off the streets, right? Maybe it's about Social Security payments that are not happening. Maybe it's about some other focal point that becomes a kind of catalyst for people. I'm wondering what your thinking is between sort of protests that are broad in nature versus, beginning to hone in on the things that can really cause and drive redress.
So I have some thoughts on this because
Yeah,
I think there can be a reasonable pushback from folks who say no kings, okay, sure, hands off, sure. What's that going to produce? Why should we even show up? And the way that I view any protest or any tactic is that if it is a tactic on its own, it's going to fail. You're not going to accomplish anything with a tactic.
yeah,
A tactic needs to fit into a strategy, which needs to be designed to achieve a goal or a set of goals. Our goal is to safeguard American democracy and ensure that Donald Trump isn't able to concentrate power in his own hands permanently. We want free and fair elections going forward. We want a repeat of what happened in Wisconsin, the Supreme Court race earlier this year, where Elon Musk tried to buy it with $20 million, but he failed. The people pushed back. We had a free and fair election. We won. We want to see that in the midterms. We want to see that in the Virginia elections this November, in the New Jersey elections this November. We want to see that in 2028. Okay. How do we accomplish that?
yeah,
We need a couple of things. We need a big coalition that does not agree on a lot. I want to say that again. We need a coalition that is not fully aligned on what a 2029 policy agenda ought to be when we have a Democratic trifecta. That is core. We need a coalition that is a coalition of no, that includes the Democratic Socialists and normal, everyday progressives and independents and never Trump Republicans and Trump voters who wanted lower prices of eggs but are getting fascism and are angry about that. We
yep,
need a coalition that is broad and ideologically diverse and geographically dispersed. If you are organizing in this moment in a room where everybody agrees with you, the room is too small.
yeah,
I stole that from Maurice Mitchell from Working Families Party. I think it's brilliant. We need to be able to reach out to other people who are not fully aligned with on a proactive vision. And also, just saying no kings is not enough to get to your point, Stephen. We need to have specific demands because power concedes nothing without a demand.
right,
If it's just vague expressions of anger, you'll get people on our side saying, yeah, I agree, giving a speech and then not doing anything else.
yeah.
And we need action. So where my mind goes,
One to the other from that broad inclusive that makes everyone feel that they're part of it and it matters and it's a chance to express yourself, to being able to have enough clearly defined goals that it can really drive change.
And they need to be so right now in this moment, the goals that I'm focused on are the goals we can actually achieve in the short term.
Mhm.
I'm not focused on the long term right now. When the house is on fire, I'm not considering what kind of remodeling of the bathroom I'd like to do. I would love to remodel America's bathrooms, metaphorically speaking. But right now the house is on fire. We got to put it out. And so then the question is, how do we put that out? The danger that I'm worried about right now.
Fires, that's the other part of it, right? So it's also a question of which fire to focus on.
Well, so here's where I think we're headed. I think we are headed, if we are able to safeguard our democracy through the 2026 midterms, I think we're headed towards a Democratic blowout. We're going to take the House of Representatives at the very least and maybe the Senate. Now, the question is, what happens on January 3rd of 2027 when Democrats control the House of Representatives and maybe the Senate? They suddenly have subpoena power, hearing power, investigation power. They can actually start providing oversight of an overreaching federal government. What do they do with that power? The track we're on right now, without any kind of intervention, is I think this. You're going to see a Democratic leader, maybe it's Hakeem Jeffries, maybe it's somebody else, say, we won. We know the American people just care about the economy. We just have to talk about inflation. We just need to talk about prices. We need to demonstrate that we can work across the aisle. So we're going to reach over to our Republican counterparts and we're going to try to work on an immigration bill or an infrastructure bill and put aside that talk about impeachment or subpoenas or hearings. That's a distraction. We shouldn't do that. We've got to really focus on what the middle of the road wants to say. And I think that'd be a catastrophic mistake.
Yeah,
But we're not going to change that if we wait until January of 2027 to start influencing the discussion. There are elections happening now. There are primaries happening now. We can start making demands now. So when those Democratic leaders get in, there's not a question of what is the agenda going to be. It should have been set by then. It
yeah,
should be a fait accompli that on January 3rd, the Democrats get in, and on January 4th, this is where the investigations start. The subpoenas start flying. The hearings start going up. We stop all the BS that Trump is doing unilaterally, and we grind down the wheels of government so the American public can get a good look at everything they spent the last 6 months doing and everything they're going to spend the next 18 months doing. But
yeah,
again, we have to demand that. It is not enough to just vote for the Democrats over the Republicans and elect a new majority. We've got to make sure that those Democrats, and I'm not parachuting into any district and primarying anybody. That's up to locals to do. But we can put forward a vision for what 2027 ought to look like, and we can put
yeah.
that forward right now.
Yeah, and let's just say we wouldn't be in this predicament if the Democrats held the criminals accountable going back to 2024 to 2020 and forward. And we don't have to get into a long conversation about the failures of Merrick Garland or
Merrick Garland. We
beyond.
cannot Merrick Garland ourselves again. We cannot
Yeah,
Merrick Garland ourselves.
so I don't, I think we're in this moment where looking back is not productive, but also, the looking forward is the necessity of holding accountable the people who have put us in this position, who have allowed this kind of criminality to go on, and for millions of Americans to think that it's tolerable, that it's acceptable. So I mean, I couldn't agree with you more about at least what part of that agenda has to include. I also want to at least pause and raise the question that I think a lot of people fear, which is, look, we're heading toward Trump invoking the Insurrection Act, create a situation and then claim that it's necessary because there's a rebellion and the he's got to come in to bring in his troops to keep America safe, right? That wasn't his interest, obviously, in January 6th, 2021, but here we are. So, just looking for a moment at the toward the midterms, are you concerned at all between an insurrection act and maybe martial law that it's going to be hard to get an election through?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course I'm concerned, Stephen. And I wish I had some secret plan that we were hatching in order to safeguard democracy. I mean, look, I'm not a scholar of authoritarianism. I'm not an academic. I haven't written books on the subject. I read a lot. I I try to work with our movement and do that informed by the experts in authoritarianism around the world. And what I have learned from them, and I welcome pushback, is when you've got a country that's experiencing an autocratic breakthrough moment like we are right now. Not just a conservative government, but a government that is concentrating power in its hands and systematically attacking the pillars of democracy, the businesses, the media institutions, the universities, the law firms. When you have that, there's no secret tool to use other than peaceful, strategic organizing of normal, everyday people. That's it. That is it. And so when I try to figure out how can we be part of the solution now, my answer is we've got to roll out the red carpet for newbies. We've got to welcome people from disparate parts of life into our movement, ideologically diverse people, people who we don't agree with. We've got to create welcoming, leaderful movements that allow people to not just join and participate, not just consume the information we're putting out, but invest in them leadership. Allow them to be part of owning this on the ground. I am not the leader of Indivisible or of No King's Day. This is being led by thousands of people who are looking around saying, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening in America. I guess I have to do something.
Yeah.
And they have this internal monologue, every one of them, this debate with themselves of, I have to do this, but I'm not a leader. Why should I have to do this? And they decide to do it. They decide to start an Indivisible group, or they decide to start a No King's Day protest and be part of it. And my goal is to make it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to come in and to train them as much as possible to make these events effective, which is to say strategic and peaceful. Because if you don't do that, then you risk playing directly into the hands of the authoritarians. Am I worried that Trump is going to escalate from now until the midterms and try to call off the elections? You're damn right I am. And the only solution I know to stop that is to get millions of people who will demand that we have safe, free, fair elections.
Right. So, look, I mean, we talked about this at the beginning. Government depends on the consent of the governed. Democracy, self-governance depends upon, the people recognizing that they individually and ultimately collectively have power to define their own future, define their own fate. And so, I think this is a moment that we hope it's a kind of catalyzing moment that activates an awful lot of people who didn't think it would end up like this. I mean, I don't think about the 77 million plus that voted for Trump. That's one thing. But how about the 89 million people who chose to sit out, who
Yeah.
chose not to participate, and who I think are as responsible for our current predicament as all of those who voted for Trump. And so, this is a moment, where I'm looking every day and asking the question: is this the event that's going to finally catalyze people to get involved, right? So I wonder, soldiers in the street. I mean, well, okay, now we're talking about LA. We're watching that experiment, quote unquote, happen, combined with this, this fascistic parade that's going to happen on Saturday. I'm wondering whether you look at that and probably that expanding to other cities, probably New York, Chicago. We'll see how it goes. Do you look at that as maybe one of those events, one of those moments, one of those visuals, if you will, that finally people say like that's not my America?
Absolutely. The only pushback I'd have is there's, I don't believe, going to be one central catalyst. And I think this has been an error in the judgment of some of our political leaders. I remember earlier this year, Chuck Schumer giving interviews saying, well, we haven't reached a constitutional crisis yet, but when this specific thing happens, we will have reached a constitutional crisis. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. We are a frog in boiling water. That is slowly increasing temperature water. That is how it's going. And so I've seen numerous catalytic events over the course of the last 6 months. The first catalytic event was the election itself.
Yeah.
A week after the election, we put out a new Indivisible guide recommending that people organize where they are and focus on where they had leverage. We had 40,000 people join that call a week after the election looking to figure out how they could start Indivisible groups. We had more Indivisible groups form in November than any month since 2017. And then we beat that number in December. We beat the December number in January. We beat the combined November, December, January number in February. And then we beat the February number of new indivisible groups in March. So the catalysts have been coming. The OMB freeze was another catalyst event. The February recesses were another catalytic event. We had in March, there was another catalyst when Republicans stopped showing up at town halls and hiding from people. And so people started showing up and creating their own events. This is another one of those. And we've got to understand, for folks who are watching this live stream right now, we are on the forefront. You care so much about democracy that you are spending your time in an afternoon looking at this discussion. Two guys talk about how we organize. Most people are not paying attention now. Most people are usually not paying attention. But from time to time, there are events like Trump sending the military into LA to crush what are mostly peaceful protests. And some number of new people say, oh my gosh, I wasn't paying attention before, but now I'm paying attention. What do I do? And our challenge as organizers in that moment is to get our hooks into them and pull them into our movement. Say, welcome. We need you. Thank you for coming. Not where have you been? Why weren't you with us before? Why didn't you help us get out of this mess? No, we need to welcome them with open arms into our movement and have them take on leadership and pull new people in. So if you are just watching this for the first time, if you're new to this, or if you're an old timer and you were planning to go,
and you have friends and you have neighbors,
yes,
and you happen to be in the grocery store and you're standing next to somebody, all of those are opportunities to talk about where we are and what we need to do.
You took the words out of my mouth, Stephen. This is not going to be saved. No King's Day is not going to be a success because we got some like multi-million-dollar ad budget and it's going to advertise everywhere. It's spreading through word of mouth. I don't want people on this call just going to No King's Day protests. I want people leaving this discussion and immediately going to post on their social media or calling their grandma or asking their kids in college, hey, did you hear about this? Are you showing up? We need help spreading the word. That is an act of defiance. That is an act of opposition. That is building the pro-democracy force. You've got to be part of it, though. Nobody's going to tap you on your shoulder and say, hey, it's time to lead. You've got to do it.
Yeah.
But if enough people do it, we win. It is game over. That is how we win.
And it's a political necessity and it's a moral imperative and it's a legal expression, right? Peaceful protest. It couldn't be a more fundamental expression of what it means to be American. And so, I hope that part of this is not only like I'm angry at the Trump regime and what this guy and his regime has done, but also, I'm proud to be American and I recognize that it's not just like a fight, it's also remembering and expressing what we're fighting for. And that's equality and it's justice and it's all of the things that matter to building a kind of multi-level diverse society that I think surely everybody on this call is interested in. And so look, let's just we have a few minutes. I want to at least, I'm always sort of asking this question between sort of hope on the one hand, fear, alarm on the other hand. And I'm wondering sort of where you are at this moment in terms of your level of hope and optimism. And at the same time, where do you think we're going to be 2 months, 3 months, maybe even 6 months from now?
Oh, I hesitate to make predictions, but here's what I will say. Here's what I will say. I think Trump is misplaying his hand right now. I think what he is doing is visibly, obviously overreach. People who might agree with him otherwise on immigration, people who might agree with him otherwise on his orientation towards institutions broadly, his desire to break up the system, people who don't like politics or think Republicans are problematic, but Democrats are feckless and corrupt too. People are seeing this in the streets. People are seeing him totally ignore due process. People are seeing him disappear Americans, people who are not ideologically aligned with me. And they're saying, what the hell?
Yeah.
Come on. Like, we can't accept this. Look, I'm with him on a lot of stuff, but we can't accept this. I think he's overplaying his hand. And we have the opportunity to pull a ton of new people into a peaceful pro-democracy movement and response that will entirely prevent him from clinging to power beyond the power he's already won in the last election. Yeah. So I'm pretty damn hopeful right now, I would say. The numbers we are seeing at nokings.org since Los Angeles have just skyrocketed. We are seeing a ton of interest all over the world right now. It was already high, and it's skyrocketed. So I who knows what the future has to bring? We don't know. It's a dangerous time, but the most optimistic I get is when I'm actually talking with people on the ground who are doing this work, because these are not professional politicos. These are not people who get paid to do any kind of political work. They're teachers and IT technicians and nurses and office workers and federal workers, and they're deciding to invest their limited time, energy, and resources to be part of the biggest pro-democracy movement in modern American history.
Right.
That gives me hope, Stephen. I'm sorry, I can't help but feel hope when I
But
see that.
sure. So, but let's ask. So June 14th is the No Kings protest. Hoping everyone's going to come. Hoping they'll bring everyone they know. Let's get millions and millions of Americans and and everyone out onto the streets. How quickly does a sustained effort happen after that? I mean, I know all the push is about this week, but it seems to me that this effort really has to be moving toward a more sustained movement that's visible. So how does that happen?
Well, I mean, it happens in coalition with a lot of partners, not just Indivisible. I have my eye on July 17th. I know a lot of civil rights organizations are looking at the 5-year anniversary of John Lewis's passing. John Lewis, this hero of American history, this giant in the active engagement of nonviolent protest across Edmund Pettus Bridge, famously. I think there's an opportunity to make a lot of change around the July 4th holiday, with politicians out at parades, including Republicans and Democrats, to show up and push them in the right direction. I think Trump is overreaching on the Medicaid cuts and this reconciliation bill, that it's going to devastate communities that he purports to represent. I don't think it's going to be any one individual. This is it. We're going to show up again. It's got to be building a muscle. We have to constantly be pulling more people in and building the pro-democracy communities. And if we do that, maybe I'm naive, Stephen. I believe our cause is just and popular. I believe in the people who are organizing. I believe ultimately we're going to prevail. But we have to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I couldn't be more grateful for the work that you're doing and the ability of you and 1,800, organizations, 1,800 gatherings of people around the country that have recognized the need to do something and to do it now. So I'm looking forward to June 14th. Really appreciate all the work that you've been doing so far. I think this is going to be an ongoing thing. I hope it is, because there's nothing less than a country to save. And like you, I'm an optimistic person in general. I mean, it doesn't make me hesitate to look as clearly and soberly as I can to what's happening. I mean, I think we all have to do that. We shouldn't look away. We should look directly at the kind of violations that are happening, and as heartbreaking as they are, as tragic as they can be. Don't look away. This is a time to really engage what's happening and do what you can to show your support for vulnerable people, whether it's a next door neighbor or somebody you see at the grocery store, or somebody in your community, or in the community next to you, to participate and to engage in acts of kindness that I think are critical at this time for Americans to feel connected and to feel like that their country hasn't been taken over and undermined by an agenda and a ruler that is committed to hate and cruelty. So all of that is sort of part of, I think, this ongoing effort right now. And I again thank you so much for the work you've been doing, for the work you're going to need to keep doing in the coming months, and for having this conversation now, and for everybody who's here. Please be sure to come on the 14th. Do check out Ezra's Substack if you have a chance, and look forward to maybe talking again sometime soon.
Would love it, Stephen. Here. And thank you for spreading the word. We need everybody talking to everybody they can talk to let them know we're showing up together. We have strength in numbers, but we've got to show up together. Thanks,
Yeah.
Stephen.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.